I'm Chris, and this is my good friend Dustin. We're out in Lake Charles today in his area because we want to showcase what do you do when you have a home that has high humidity and you're trying to decide, is this an HVAC problem or is this a building science problem? And one thing we've been talking about and one thing we want to try to make clear is when you are an HVAC technician and you show up to a home that could be a building science problem, what do you need to do as an HVAC professional to check the boxes so you can say this is no longer an HVAC problem or it is? And that's where we're going to figure out today through the education of Dustin where we need to draw the line in the sand.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do today is just go in the house. We're going to take it all in, just take a look around, and then we'll get started. You can see we've got some moisture-related damage and what's likely some air leakage occurring in either the duct system or the ceiling penetration. Right in here, these are pretty telltale signs of duct leakage. Could also be infiltration occurring from the bathroom fan, but definitely telltale signs of duct leakage. Once again, leading back to it. Also, if you look at this door right here, you'll see that we have a lot of dust, which leads me to suspect that we have some building pressurization issues. Or room pressurization, I should say. This vent is practically closed. We'll have to find out if the homeowner felt that this room was getting too cold or not.
No dust on that door frame.
Nope. You can, going back to using your senses, it's musky in here. You got a considerable amount of buildup on these grills. Now, if they're using poor filtration and the humidity's high, a lot of that dust will stick to those surfaces. Interesting enough, we can see here we have a supply air outlet and a bath fan, and if you follow that, that's a neat little line showcasing
Let me get a close-up of that.
The leakage that's occurring at those sources.
Wow, look at that. Super interesting. Never seen one with such a clear defined air pattern like that.
Neither have I. That's a unique one.
That's a first.
Yeah, that is a unique one. Now, we're going to leave all these doors open. There's another reason why whenever you're walking through the house, one, you get a glimpse of what's happening. That way, once we get into the attic, we can actually navigate and know where we're at and what problems we should be looking for. But also, I get to leave all the doors open. That way, throughout my test, I'm not allowing the house to create any pressure differential issues because of open or closed doors. You can see the streaking on the door there. So, frame room over garage, and this is a bonus that was built. And when I say a bonus, they built the garage and the room all at once. It wasn't an afterthought. But this definitely is going to be the area, at least so far that I've walked through, and I feel that's going to have the most moisture-related issues. And that could be from the garage, or it also could be some building construction or HVAC related. So this room, just like downstairs, it's 70 degrees. However, it is 70% relative humidity. That is excessively high. That is at the point to where we're now going to start growing things, and not the stuff that you want to grow in a house. It's not children.
So at this point, Dustin, do you feel like you've walked the house to know enough about where you want to start?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I've seen enough walking through to identify where everything's at, where the problems are predominantly occurring, and so that way the time that I do spend in their attic will be best spent. So yeah, let's get started.
We walked this house, and when we walk this house, Dustin, what do you see?
I see excessive signs pointing towards the home going underneath the negative pressure.
Tell us what you mean by the house is going under negative pressure. What screams to you, we have got a negative house?
Sure. So the lights are obviously a very large indicator where the starburst pattern is occurring at the different building penetrations in the ceiling. There's even some in the walls, around light switch covers, plug covers. Pretty much anywhere there is a penetration, we are seeing excessive staining and ghosting occurring around that area.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to believe that there is something drawing air out of the house. The house is literally going into a negative pressure in reference to outdoors. And so that we're taking in all these outdoor conditions and we're just pushing them into the house.
Yep. What's going to be our action item right here? What are we going to go do first now that we know our house is going negative?
Well, what I'd like to do is go ahead and take a walk around the outside of the house to get a feel on everything and confirm the equipment sizing while we're out there. So all throughout here, you can see that we've been drawing pretty intense amount of air into here because of how dirty the intake vents are. I don't suspect that that's natural ventilation. I think that we're literally drawing the air out of this section of the house with a vacuum.
So Dustin, what do you think would cause that? Let's talk about what's causing that draw of the soffit ventilation so heavily. Is there anything?
Well, I mean, roof power ventilators are going to be the number one cause of a house being pulled into a negative or an attic.
You mean like that one?
Just like that one. That is a power ventilated.
So we've got one
roof
power
vent.
Ventilator, and
Well, and if you look right here,
I see that, and it looks pretty new.
we have another one right here as well.
Okay, so we've got a second power ventilator, which also looks pretty new.
See, and what can happen with those too is it doesn't know where it's pulling its air from. It's just trying to get as much as it can. And so it's going to do its best to pull from the soffit, but it could be pulling from the ridge or even the house. Seeing what I'm seeing, I don't like to jump to conclusions, but those could very well be worsening our problem. They might not be what's caused the initial, but it could be worsening. So that's our second story bonus room or frog.
There's our third power ventilator,
Right.
which also looks pretty new.
So we know we have at least 3 of those.
So we've got 3 new power ventilators on the roof of this house.
Yeah.
All right, Dustin, we are in the second floor. We've got the scuttle hole, which isn't the best access in the world, but
Yeah, it's a little
we're going to go
offset.
up there. And tell me why you're headed up there.
Well, we really need to take a look at the equipment and see how it was installed. Before we start jumping into leakage testing and everything else, we need to see, does this even pass the eye test? Okay, so we're up here, and as I suspected, they didn't necessarily follow the best installation practices. It's pretty tight. We don't have any type of serviceable access, but as you see here, looks like some mistakes were made, and so they taped all that back on. We got some sticky collars designed for duct board, but there's no sealant on our ducts, which are also pretty damp. Lots of compression in the duct system too, which is going to result in a lack of performance. This duct is physically wet from
Sitting in insulation.
well, sitting in insulation, but then also this right here, this turn in the flexible duct is causing this duct to crimp. And so it gets very turbulent, slows that airflow down, And then right here where it's making contact with that wood,
Oh, look at that wood.
you're going to get,
Let's do a close-up right there.
you're going to get a lot of conduction.
That wood's wet to the touch.
There's no insulation around the perimeter of this building because they didn't put the proper insulation down or roof soffit connection. So all the insulation can either fall out or get blown inward. In this particular case, it looks like a little bit of both, but that's going to cause the backside of that drywall to be very hot and humid, and the inside drier, which is potential for all kinds of moisture related fun. All right, so it looks like at some point someone attempted solving the problems by adding what appears to be a 90 or 120 pint dehumidifier. However, at some other point, someone decided to disconnect this unit and it's no longer in service. They went ahead and they disconnected it, and they disconnected the ductwork. However, this duct is that second return air duct that we found upstairs, and it is still hooked up to the piece of equipment. Now that's pretty alarming because we saw there was return air leakage on the main return air duct, as well as we know that there's a leakage occurring through this attempt at sealing by putting a strap on this duct. And so for that area to still be underneath the negative pressure, even with this return and that return leaking, that's exceptionally concerning. We have some major issues occurring, both duct leakage and building infiltration. So right here, obviously somebody's cut this in, added it after the fact. You can see that they did put a strap, however, there is no sealant applied anywhere. There's a lot of play in it. I would suspect that this is leaking.
It's not insulated.
Yeah, it's an uninsulated.
It's just a wooden box, no insulation.
Yeah, it's a wooden box. No attempt was made at air sealing. In fact, look here. I'm lifting it up all around the seams.
Oh, let me get a close-up.
It's held together with 2 sheet metal screws. All right, so right here we have a 4-inch inline dryer booster fan to remove the lint from the dryer or assist it in getting out. However, it's just blowing in the attic.
As Dustin pointed out earlier, that booster fan was disconnected. Something that's just super concerning is the amount of lint that is collected on the flue pipe of this 80% furnace that's feeding the master suite. I mean, you can see the lint that's collecting on the water heater on top.
All right, so we're at system number 3. This is the system serving the bedrooms. And as you can see, based off of these fittings that cannot be found in Manual D, we have lots of tape being used and lots of leakage points in this area that we suspect is resulting in duct leakage as well. A couple things I see right out the gate. I've got some exposed ductwork right there that's going to cause some condensation issues. This entire seam right here could result in air leakage, but
something else I'd like to point out, Dustin, whenever these ducts are touching on the plenum like that,
absolutely,
when ducts are touching like that, that's just going to make them sweat.
Correct. So like if I've run my hand right here,
soaking wet.
It's very wet, and that is from, look here, good old water.
So you don't want your ducts touching.
Yeah, you want your ducts in a row, and you don't want them touching, and obviously you want to seal them, because this is not being sealed.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, boy.
So Dustin here has did a walkthrough on the house. Now we're going to make things a little bit more interesting right here, right now. Cody just showed up from down the street, and he's going to help us out. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to divide and conquer and show you how this game would be played if Dustin here decides to be my building scientist and building scientist only, And Cody here is my HVAC technician and HVAC technician only. So we're gonna follow Cody and see what he does and where he decides to draw the line for us. And where that line gets drawn, if he was to call a building scientist, like Dustin in this case, what is Dustin gonna show us if we were to call in a building scientist to help us once the HVAC guy was complete with his work?
As the HVAC professional, my first move in an application or a house that is typically negative, which is what we have seen with the indicators given to us by our colleague on site, our first step should always be to test the duct system for total leakage. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and run a duct blast test for total duct leakage. The results of the duct blast test have shown that we have 400.6 CFM25 on a 4-ton unit. All right, we have confirmed that there is a substantial amount of duct leakage. Before we move forward with quoting the repairs to the homeowner, we're going to pull out the true flow grid and pressure map the system to make sure that there's an adequately sized duct system on the air conditioner at this time. We're going to measure, return duct static. And now we're going to install the true flow in the main return. Okay, we're looking at the results from the true flow test, and what we can see here is that we have a very high static pressure. Now the first thing we did was verify the fan speed and saw that it was not on high speed, and yet we still have a 0.9 static pressure. And so therefore, with the test results combined from the duct leakage test as well as the true flow grid, we believe that it is in the best interest of the homeowner not to seal the existing ductwork, but to go back with a properly manual D designed duct system so that we can ensure that this unit runs to the best possible capacity as we can absolutely get.
All right, so Cody's finished up doing the duct leakage and the total system airflow verification of the equipment. We obviously know that we have a lot of leakage occurring on the air conditioner side of things. However, this is where he's handed it off to me. He's taking care of the HVAC system. He needs somebody to make sure that once his work's done, we can actually control this house. And here we go. Oh, definitely. Okay, we just finished up doing the blower door test. We chose pressurization in this case because earlier through the walkthrough, we observed the presence of some microbial growths, and we did not want to bring that into the home, so we chose to pressurize and push that out of the house. The house tested at approximately 3,907 CFM50. That equates to about 5.3 ACH 50. So just over a 1-to-1 square foot to CFM ratio. That tells me that this home should be controllable with proper mechanical HVAC systems and design. If the HVAC systems are improperly sized or there is excessive leakage, which we have identified earlier, then this can be a runaway. We can start to lose control of the temperature and the humidity especially in the home, which is the leading cause to why we have all that microbial growth that we discovered. All right, so we've ran the blower door test. We've confirmed that the house is relatively controllable as far as air tightness goes. That's our air barrier. Now we're going to look at our thermal barrier, because as the building science standpoint, I want to ensure that once we've resolved all of this HVAC related leakage, that once we send that air to that room, we're actually able to control that room's temperature. We won't be able to do that if it's not insulated properly. All right, so if you can remember, whenever we did a walkthrough earlier, we found some missing insulation. I'm going to showcase what that looks like on a thermal imager. So, as you can see here, this is the area of the behind the tub where there's no insulation present. Let's go on up and see what else we can find. So as we've gotten a little bit closer, we can see that we're missing insulation around the perimeter, as well as right along the top. Oftentimes that's your double top plate, and so we've got some going on there. This in the corner, that's normal. The good news is the walls are insulated. The bad news is we're getting a lot of bridging through this wall. This is where those ducts were routed, and you know that wall temperature is approximately 82 at its highest. However, it is currently 73 degrees in this room. All right, so in there, that's that uninsulated interior wall. And if you look at it from a thermal standpoint, the back side of that wall is about 78 degrees, which is right at our average dew point. Meaning this wall has the potential to actually condense anytime that the temperature is below dew point, average being 78 in our market, and right now it's at a point to where it can actually develop condensation and microbial growth as a result from that.
Okay, so that's the home assessment on the house behind us. So we hope we gave you some insight from the HVAC perspective, which we had Cody do a total duct leakage test, and then he did a true flow test, identifying that we have some major ductwork issues that we need to tend to, and the proper solution would probably be just replace the ductwork based on a good design. Now, that doesn't solve all problems, but we identified that Cody could make a solid decision by pulling in a building scientist, and our building scientist here, Dustin, who then ran a blower door to confirm that the shell was not super bad, right? It's average, it's controllable. We're not gonna guarantee 50% humidity in this house every day of the year, but we're not probably growing mold or mildew or having issues like that unless they're coming from something else. Now, during the walkthrough, we identified that we had power ventilators, which we would probably wrap up under the building science side of things. That's probably definitely an issue, right? We're probably pulling the house into a negative. We would have loved to have done that with a dominant duct leakage test, but we had a little bit of wind today, so it wasn't the proper day to do it. Now, the second thing that Dustin did that we're going to classify in our building science is he went with the thermal camera and he started looking at the insulation in the walls, and he identified that we have some insulation issues, which are going to lead to individual comfort complaints per room, okay? Now, that is also building science driven. So Cody, who might design a manual D for the air conditioner for the house, you know, he's expecting the insulation to be intact and have a proper R value, right? In building science, we need to make sure that that R value is applied to that wall and doing its job for Cody's manual D, right? That way when he supplies the right amount of airflow to that room, everybody's happy. And that is a good way to show both sides of the story, I think, guys.
Yeah.